Hi guys. Today we're going to do a walkthrough of Al Gore's Nobel speech. So just to show my age, when he when I was a kid, he was vice president under Bill Clinton. And then I remember when he ran for president in 2000. It was like a really big deal. So most of you weren't, well, none of you were born. Let's be honest, none of you were born yet. Um, Anyway, after his run for president and he lost to George Bush, he actually became really well known as a an advocate, so somebody that works for a cause for climate change. He released a documentary. It was a very big deal, and this is really the reason for his Nobel Prize. So this is his speech from 2007, educating people about the threat of climate change. So, in the first part, he does talk about how the Alfred Nobel, the person that the prize is named after, he is the inventor of dynamite. And so, sorry, why would he begin his speech with a story about Alfred Nobel? Well, the way the speech goes is Alfred Nobel reads his obituary, but he hadn't really died. So he was able to glimpse into the future and see how he would be remembered by humanity. And he wasn't happy with how he would be remembered. So he came up with a Peace Prize so that his legacy isn't this master of death for inventing dynamite. His legacy is this Peace Prize. It's very prestigious worldwide. And I think he leads with this because what Al Gore is about to tell us is also a warning. It's a glimpse into our future. And if we don't like what we're going to see, then we need to do something now to change it. So, our first close read, it says mark words in the quote in paragraph 7 that show the two different futures to which Gore refers. So paragraph 7 is right here. It says, the distinguished scientist with whom it is the greatest honor of my life to share this award have laid before us a choice between two different futures. A choice that to my ears echoes the words of an ancient prophet, life or death, blessings or curses. Therefore choose life that both thou and thy seed may live. So the two different futures are life or death. Okay, it's like good or bad. Why would he choose this quote to show two different futures facing society? So basically, humanity's on a precipice. A precipice is like a point, a tipping point. Sorry. And it's saying you have these two choices. You need to choose life. And by the way, where it says that both thou and thy seed means like your children. So the people that come after you, the generations after you. And he's urging them to choose life. So what effect does the inclusion of the quote have on the readers? He is really appealing to the emotions. This is an emotional appeal to the readers, because who would want to die? Most people do not want to die. And so he's kind of making a bold claim that if we do not change, then we are doomed to die. Okay, so he's asking us to choose life. Let's see what other questions we got here. How does Gore compare Nobel's intentions and goals with those of modern society? I answered that earlier when I explained why they would want to lead with the story about Nobel, and we did that one. Sweet action. Let's go to the next page. All right. So on this page, it asks us to mark geographic locations in paragraph 15. So we have North and South America, Asia, Australia, and the Arctic, people in the Pacific Islands, South Asia, Mexico, Africa. there's a wide variety of geographic locations in paragraph 15. Why would he choose to include these details? So he's trying to show that these effects on the climate are felt all over the world. So basically, everybody that is hearing this message is included. There's no one on the earth who will not suffer from climate change if they don't do something. So he's showing that we are a global community and this issue affects everyone in the world. Okay. We might not all have flooding because some of us live in the mountains, but you may have wildfires. You may have stronger storms. You may have flooding. You may have temperature extremes, burning and clearing of forest. Okay. So I do want to bring this up here. This 7 years from now. Right now, it's saying that the polar ice caps, they're estimating that the ice caps may be completely gone during the summer in less than 22 years, which it hasn't been 22 years now. And then a different study also warned it could happen in as little as 7 years. 7 years from now. So why would he choose to repeat that phrase? He's repeating it to show the urgency. 7 years from now, by the way, 7 years have passed, so maybe we did something right. Okay. But 7 years is a very short time. And so he's trying to warn the public that this is a very pressing issue and needs to be dealt with immediately. Okay. Let's see what other questions we got. What details does he give about the effects of climate change? I named them. It was wildfires. That was super country when it came out of my mouth. Wildfires, massive flooding, temperature changes. It's all of those things that I mentioned earlier. Explain an inference you can draw from the text. What inference can you make about climate change based on the details? It would be that climate change creates a variety of issues. Okay, that's why there were so many different types of climate change. You can also infer that it affects everyone on the globe because places all around the globe were mentioned in that paragraph. So this next page does not have any. Anyway, it doesn't have anything. So vocab word though, urgency means it needs to be dealt with right away. It cannot wait until later. It needs to be done now. Like if somebody stabbed me, I would need to go to the hospital with urgency versus I don't know, something else that's not very urgent where I could wait before I seek medical care, like a cough. So on this page, I don't have any questions, but I do want to go over the vocab words. We have universal. Remember, uni, that means one, like a unicycle has one wheel. Sorry. So if something is universal, it means everybody in the universe. Basically, it involves everyone. Universal healthcare would be healthcare for everyone. It's a universal truth. It's a truth that is known by everyone. Okay. And then an illusion. It appears real, but it's not really real. Like a hologram. You can like stick your hand through a hologram. It's not real. You can't touch it. I actually think you guys probably knew these words. I want to point out here again, says, now comes the threat of climate crisis. Remember, a crisis is, anybody know? It is something that is, it's really hard to define in your own words. A crisis is like an emergency. There you go. A threat that is real, rising, imminent. Imminent means it is like coming soon. Okay. It's unavoidable. Like if you fail to do your work, failing the exam is imminent. Like it's coming because you're not going to be prepared if you don't do the work. And then in universal. So it means it's going to affect everyone, this crisis, this emergency. Oh, goodness. Oh, wait, I'm going to back up. On the last page, he talks about Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi is like a really well-known activist. And so saying, like referencing him is also an appeal to an expert. Anyway, in every land, the truth once known has the power to set us free. What do you guys think that means? Okay, so what this phrase means is that you can't expect people to do something about it if they don't recognize there's a problem. But once you share the truth, you allow people to start making decisions based on the truth. So once everybody realizes the truth that there is climate change, then people have the power to do something about it. Okay, now we'll go on to the next page. I feel like I need to tell you jokes between this just to keep you engaged. All right, paragraph 38 says, mark the example Gore uses to support his claim. So in this paragraph, he talks about, let's see, it says, when we unite for a moral purpose that is manifestly good, meaning it's good to its core, and true, the spiritual energy released can transform us. The generation that defeated fascism is what the Nazis believed, okay, throughout the world in the 1940s found, in rising to meet their awesome challenge, that they had gained the moral authority and long-term vision to launch the Marshall Plan, the United Nations, which is still around today, and a new level of global cooperation and foresight that unified Europe and facilitated, meaning made it easier, the emergence of democracy and prosperity in Germany, Japan, Italy, and much of the world. One of their visionary leaders said, it's time we steered by the stars and not by the lights of every passing ship. Okay, so the example that he uses in paragraph 38 is he talks about how in the 1940s, people created the United Nations. And the reason they did that is the world was divided. However, when the Nazis rose up, they had a common enemy. And so after World War II, the world had decided they did not want to fight with each other on such a scale again. And so in that case, there was this global problem and they needed a global solution for that problem, in which case it was creating the United Nations, which is kind of like a world government in a sense, where all the countries have a representative. Okay, so why do we think Gore chose this to include this specific example? I think he's trying to show that once again, there is a global problem. This time it's not fascism, it's global warming. And so we need a global solution if we have a global problem. In this case, the example is showing how the world can come together to fight a problem and be successful. And in this speech, he is calling on the world to take action on climate change. And he's showing it can be done on a global scale. The world can work together for a common problem. It's been done before. And so what he's asking the readers to do is an attainable goal. It's a goal that they can achieve. Woo, that kind of made me out of breath, guys. Oh, goodness. Okay, so we're looking at paragraphs 38 through 41 and the interactions between individuals, events, and ideas. It says, how did the events of World War II influence his passion to protect the environment? I have a feeling this is very tied to the thing I just ran out of breath explaining. But in the last paragraph, they were talking about somebody from Gore's hometown. This person winning some sort of reward. It may have been a Peace Prize. I'm not sure without going to the last page. So he's talking about their generation found moral authority. Moral authority is like where somebody can say they were on the right side of history. Like if you're choosing between right and wrong. My husband just like walked in and looked at me and then just silently like backed out of the room. Anyway, moral authority is like if somebody's going to choose right or wrong, you know that you're in the right. So in the 1940s, they found the moral authority. So they were definitely on the right side of history when they solved the world emergency, the world crisis of fascism. And then he says, so too can we find our greatest opportunity in rising to solve the climate crisis. See, it's like I just explained. We have a world problem. We need a world solution, a worldwide solution. Okay. We have an opportunity to be on the right side of history by facing and removing the danger of climate change for being cognizant. Okay, cognizant's like aware, for being aware of how our actions are affecting climate change. And so we can choose the high road. We can choose the right decision by trying to lessen our carbon footprint, which means like lessen our impact on the environment. Whew. So what solution is Gore giving to the problem on this page? Okay, so the first thing, let's look through. Right here, he says he's urging delegates from the UN. No, not from the UN. Delegates from countries around the world to adopt a treaty to put a cap on emissions, and that's the carbon emissions, the CO2, because that's what contributes to global warming. Okay, so number one is sign this mandate. A mandate's like an executive order to put a cap on emissions. And also efficiently allocates like pass out resources to the most effective opportunities for speedy reductions. Okay, so it's saying put a cap on your emissions, but also like where your government spend their money to spend money in the most effective way to fight climate change. Okay. He's asking for heads of state, so presidents and prime ministers, to meet and take responsibility for addressing the crisis. So he's asking them to be responsible. He's asking for a moratorium. A moratorium is like a pause on something, like to stop it from happening. Maybe you can pick it up later, but for like right now, don't start anything new. So he's asking for a moratorium or a pause on the construction of any new facility that burns coal. So he doesn't want governments to build new power plants that run on coal because that contributes to this carbon dioxide problem. And then he's also asking for a price on carbon with a CO2 tax. Basically saying if your country is creating a lot of pollution, then you need to be taxed on that pollution because some countries are producing way more pollution than others, like based on their population. So those are the different ways that he's saying you can address the problem. Okay, there's a lot of questions on this one. What countries does Gore applaud and which ones does he criticize? I know which ones he criticizes. That comes up as a test question. Okay, so the ones he applauds, he says, I salute Europe and Japan. Europe is not a country, but a whole continent, but all of the countries of Europe and Japan. He also applauds Australia. And then the ones that he criticizes are the United States and China, as well as India, because our countries contribute a lot to global warming, but we're not doing enough to try to curb those emissions, to try to stop those CO2 emissions. So he's calling on the U.S. to make the boldest moves and stand accountable for failing to act on this sooner. We should quit saying, well, China does this, so we should quit using the other's behavior as an excuse for a stalemate. A stalemate is like when you don't really do anything because you're like, well, they're not doing it either, so I'm not doing it, and so nothing gets done. And so instead of just finger pointing, basically, we need to develop an agenda for mutual survival. Oh, here comes Wesley. Say hello, Wesley.
Hello.
Okay, get out, please, and close the door. Now you're going the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. I just want something to eat.
Yeah, we're having dinner soon. Okay. So, oh goodness. We're standing at the most fateful fork in that path. So a fork, if you remember, you don't have to remember, you eat with a fork every day. A fork means you're going to go one way or another way. So it's kind of like in that first one, that first annotate the text question when it says choose life or death. So in this case, they're standing at a most fateful fork in the path. So we have two choices, which is basically we can do something and choose life, or we can not do anything, which is imminent death, okay, through global warming. The words impact your understanding of the author's purpose because the author is asking you to make a choice. You can't just do nothing because life is always moving forward. So you have to choose a path. And he's using that to show the path that you choose determines your fate. How does the use of fateful fork affect the tone? It shows just how important it is. And then everything I just said a second ago about which one you choose determines your fate. Use details from the text to support your response. Okay, so here it says a vision of two different futures. Again, it's showing you your future. We see with vivid clarity, that means lifelike clearness. You can see it clearly. The necessity, which is the need of choosing between these two futures, and the urgency. There's that word again, urgent. It has to be done now. The urgency of making the right choice now. Hey, I'm going to point out in paragraph 55, it talks about the Norwegian playwright Heinrich Ibsen. Just a reminder, that's going to be an appeal to authority or an expert, kind of like a right or wrong. So, in technical terms, that's called ethos. So, anyway, again, the future is knocking at our door right now. The future generation. So our children are going to say, what were you thinking? Why didn't you act? Like, why didn't you do something about this? You know, it was a problem. Or how did you find the courage to rise and successfully resolve a crisis that so many said was impossible? So there's an emotional appeal. Like, are we going to be looked at by our children with shame, or are we going to be looked at with pride and admiration? So we have a purpose. We are many. For this purpose, we will rise and we will act. So again, it's asking you to take action now. All right.